Are we kind of ready?
We're ready.
Well, I think we're ready to go. But first, let me tell you who's represented here. All these wonderful legislators and advocacy groups that worked hard on this bill. Okay, we have Asian Americans Advancing Justice. We have the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights. We have Illinois PIRG. We have Common Cause. We have Chicago Votes. We have the Action Now Institute and the Chicago Lawyers Committee. We also have Representative Robin Gable, State Senator Jackie Collins, State Rep Carol Ammons, Representative Jaime Andrade, Representative Robert Martwick, and State Senator Daniel Biss, who's in the back, but he's tall. Okay, so what we're going to have is I'm going to make some open remarks. We have other people speaking. Let me introduce them right now. Following me will be Kathleen Gang Clayton, who is head of the Asian Americans Advancing Justice, okay, followed by State Rep Robin Gable, followed by State Senator Jackie Collins, followed by State Rep Carol Ammons, and finally Devon Reed from Chicago Votes. I also want to, and we thank all you wonderful people for being here. I see representatives of other organizations that aren't on here, BGA, for example, thank you.
Rainbow Push.
I'm sorry?
Rainbow.
Rainbow Push, thank you. A lot of great people on this. I also want to make sure everybody knows Noah Prates at the end there. Noah Prates, member, is our Director of Elections. Okay, he's a person to watch. He's the upcoming star, nationally and locally in elections. And finally, many of you know Mr. Mike Kreloff, who is our policy expert, and along with these groups worked so hard on this. Okay, so we're here today to register our discontent with the governor's veto in the strongest possible terms, his veto of the voter registration, the automatic voter registration bill. Just 5 months ago, all of us and many others, including Senator Dick Durbin, stood in this room talking about the need to support automatic voter registration. Since that time, we had overwhelming support in both the House and the Senate, passed overwhelmingly, bipartisan support, including in the state Senate, if you believe this. 50 yes, only 7 no. Okay, this was a bill seriously thought about. The essence of this bill and why both Republicans and Democrats support it in the strongest terms. Number 1, efficiency in government. Number 2, accuracy of the lists. And number 3, the ease of the burden on voters. And what that simply means, in this day and age when our society is so mobile, people move a lot. And why deny people the right to vote or make them go through hurdles when we have the data sharing, when the data sharing in government, we have it right there. Okay, so that's the heart of what we wanted. Okay, so we thought that was the time to come. This is what we believed, what in fact was going to happen until, of course, this veto took place. My little makeshift things here don't always work here, so. Thank you. Okay, I explained why this is so important. Now to the governor, your veto has undermined all these goals. Undermined the goals of efficiency, undermined the goals of accuracy in our lists, and undermined the goals of ease of people registering. Let me be specific. I'm only going to take a moment here. Voters, as we know, must be registered at their current address. We now know of 700,000 people, thanks to ERIC, which is another thing we all work to pass. That is a data sharing process that Illinois joined with several other states. We share data, very important, because we can find out when people die in other states. We can find out when they move in other states, keep our lists up. We know now that 700,000 people have an old registration address. They're registered to vote. They're in the database, Secretary of State's office, but they're not at the address where they're registered. And we know that this is 1 out of 10 people in the state of Illinois. So I hope people are listening. So 1 out of 10 of you are going to go through an unfortunate process. The most efficient, the most accurate, and the least burdensome way of handling those 700,000 people are in the bill, which simply change these registrations and bring them up to date. That was part of the bill. Even though the bill was supposed to take place in January 2018, this part was take place right now. So those 700,000 people could have been made whole before the election with modern technology, data sharing, boom. Okay. Now, the governor's veto ensures that those 700,000 people are handled in the most inefficient, the most inaccurate, and the most burdensome way possible. Most of them, of course, don't even know it. They think they're registered, and somehow they're going to find out, but it goes further than that. So 1 at a time. Remember, part of efficiency in government and all these people here and our elected officials are working so hard to bring efficiency in government, is not do things one at a time, not when you've got modern technology. But what the governor's ensuring, these people one at a time, hopefully someone's listening today, finally realize, hey, wait a second, my driver's license or information is not updated, I got to re-register. That's not the way to do it. Also what it means, oh shoot. Crazy. I'll tell you.
That's the governor. Dave,
The only time I turn it off is in the movie theater. Okay. The other things that disturb us so much because we want efficiencies is think about this. All the county clerks in the state have these lists. Hundreds of thousands of people. Okay? So now we're mailing to these 700,000 people, but they're not there. They're not getting the information about where to vote, where to register, et cetera. Okay? We're paying people, temps, okay, to come in and do this stuff. Good people, but people make mistakes. All of these things are inefficient. We don't need to do it one at a time. We need to do it as the bill would have allowed to do it. And finally, in terms of the inefficiencies, we also passed Election Day registration. Again, the people in this room work so hard to do that. But none of us want Election Day registration to be the main way to register. Election Day is the stopgap when everything else doesn't work. Now, what the governor's doing, instead of maybe having 23,000 people Election Day for our jurisdiction, we're going to have over 100,000 people. That is insane and inefficient. Okay? Because that raises all sorts of questions. The irony is the governor used the phrase integrity. Integrity would be improved by this bill. Integrity is threatened by what he did. Okay? We do not want to drive everybody to Election Day registration. That is a stopgap measure. And so now these hundreds of thousands of people will be struggling trying to figure out what to do, and hopefully you'll let them know they need to do something. But this is a terribly inefficient way to do it. There's many other problems with this veto. The problem is we've got good people who want to speak to it. And so let's go right ahead now. And secondly, now we're going to hear from Kathleen. Okay?
Would you say and spell your name and give us your title?
Sure. Kathleen Young Clayton, Kathleen Yang-Clayton. I'm Deputy Director of Asian Americans Advancing Justice. Good. Hello, my name is Kathleen Young Clayton of Asian Americans Advancing Justice Chicago, and today on behalf of the Just Democracy Coalition, we express our deep disappointment with Governor Bruce Rauner's veto of automatic voter registration. In our push for AVR, over 50 organizations statewide signed on to endorse. And this diverse coalition, all of these folks that you see behind me, include civil rights groups, community organizing groups, and good government organizations working together with policymakers and legislators from both sides of the aisle for 7 months to get this bill passed. At any time, the governor could have raised his concerns with SB 250, but instead he waited until the 11th hour and vetoed a good bill. Asian Americans and immigrants across Illinois are involved in this campaign because we know that the right to vote in this country was a hard-fought battle from its beginning. Automatic voter registration increases access to the ballot box, which is a crucial step to a more engaged electorate. Combined with a recent lawsuit attempting to stop Election Day registration, this veto signifies a step backwards for voting rights in Illinois. Contrary to Governor Rauner's inaccurate and unhelpful remarks that our bill would violate federal law and lead to widespread fraud, automatic voter registration will actually increase election security by taking our already existing electronic voter databases and making it easier to stop voter fraud before it happens. Governor Rauner brought up 3 specific instances of voter fraud in his veto message, all of which occurred over 10 years ago, 2 of which would have actually been prevented had AVR been in place. Thus, the governor's veto message conveys a false sincerity. He might say that he wants to modernize the voter registration system, but this veto says otherwise. He says he wants to prevent fraud, but instead, Governor Rauner demonizes immigrants, ignoring the fact that automatic voter registration would have prevented cases such as the ones that he cites in his own veto. Through it all, Governor Rauner's actions dismiss the months of work by our coalition and the bipartisan group of legislators who support modernizing voter registration in Illinois. In the months ahead, we will be rallying our communities and working together with county clerks such as David Orr and members of the legislature, some of whom will be speaking after me, to overturn this veto and reestablish Illinois as a national leader in voting rights. Thank you.
State Rep Robert Gable.
Good morning. My name is Robin Gable. I'm from Evanston, and I'm the state representative for the 18th District. So I have been involved in voting rights for many years, since the 1980s when we first started doing deputy registrars. We would go door to door, we'd register people at local grocery stores and malls. And we made a lot of progress, but there is still much more progress to be made. There are still millions of people who are eligible to vote, but are not registered. Voting is a basic American right. It is not a prize that is given to those who can jump through the hoops and break through the bureaucratic loopholes. This bill would have made it easier for people to register to vote who are using state services, like similar to getting their license changed or getting their driver's license for the first time. I'm very disappointed by the governor's veto. I am committed to continue to fight to make sure that every citizen in this state is enfranchised. There is a broad bipartisan coalition who supported this bill, 86 votes in the House. I will continue to work with that group, and I'm determined to make sure that we have legislation in November, either a veto override or legislation that we can all vote for. Thank you.
State Senator Jacqueline Collins.
Good morning. I am State Senator Jacqueline Collins. I represent the 16th Legislative District. So as we've heard from Robin, the right to vote for one's representatives has been America's fundamental freedom since this nation was founded. Its expression in our Constitution and throughout much of our history was imperfect and perfected only by the willingness of ordinary people to make extraordinary sacrifices. Some bled, some were jailed, and many died. As a woman of color, I find unconscionable the recent campaigns in many states to reverse our progress, limiting access to the polls under the guise of fraud prevention. And this summer, we have seen federal courts uphold the Constitution and strike down voter ID laws with their discriminatory effects. Here in Illinois, I was proud to vote and sponsor the bill with a bipartisan group of many of my colleagues to reject the politics of suspicion and division and instead move forward toward greater access with automatic voter registration. The governor's veto of this legislation hits the pause button to progress. We have all seen powerful images of young people protesting injustice and calling for change. They are the voices of historically underrepresented communities, and they tell the bitter truth that government does not always work for them and their families. They need the power of the vote, and our arcane registration system too often stands in the way. Democracy can't wait. Democracy can't wait. That's why we call on the governor today to work with us to move our state forward and not backwards.
Now for a downstate perspective, State Representative Carol Ammons.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Representative Carol, C-A-R-O-L, Ammons, A-M-M-O-N-S, from the 103rd District of Champaign-Urbana, representing University of Illinois. Today is no coincidence that since the passing of the 19th Amendment in 1920, giving women the right to vote, women began attending colleges in growing numbers, entering professions once dominated by men, building their economic power and independence, and having influence with elected officials that represent them and the policies they enact. This veto flies in the face of that. It also is no coincidence that since the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, we've seen record minority voting. An immediate 250,000 of African Americans registered to vote at that time, a 35% increase in Hispanic registered voters, and 58% increase in registered Asian American voters. Minority voting blocs have gained political recognition and participation, allowing them to elect officials that look like them, live like them, and understand the unique issues that face them. Most importantly, it's no coincidence that as women and minorities are gaining representation as elected officials, utilizing the voting rights to influence party direction and policy choices, there has been a concerted effort to roll back the clock. This veto is in line with that effort. Not only has the automatic voter registration veto had no justification that is understandable, but Republicans are also attacking what we see happening across the board, moving away from the right-wing agenda to destroy the right to vote for American people. In Urbana-Champaign, we saw a 53% turnout rate among registered student voters, up from 21% in 2008. Of those 6,235 votes cast in 2016 primary at campus precincts, 82% of them were Democratic primary voters. This is part of that agenda. There is an agenda to restrict voting, and we should not mix words with that. This is a dangerous one. This veto re-emphasizes our efforts that we need to take to protect the rights of individuals to vote. I promise to continue to work on SB 250. As said before, we may have to do this in veto session because voting is a fundamental right. It is one of our major pillars of democracy. It brings balance and access. I am the first African American woman voted in the 103rd District in the history of Illinois. And that would not happen without the access to the ballot. We deserve the right to make sure that every American, 18 and older, and if you're 17 by election day, you can register and vote. We want to reduce the lines and the restrictions, and this veto sends the wrong message. So I urge the governor to work with us to find a reasonable way to bring efficiency to the voting process. Thousands of students at the University of Illinois will circle the Illini Union come this election day unnecessarily because they could have already been registered to vote. Let's work together to get this done, and if so, in veto session, we call on our Republican colleagues to help bring back the fundamental right of the access to the ballot. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. And finally, Devin Reed from Chicago Votes.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Devon Reed, D-E-V-O-N, R-E-I-D, and I'm a voting rights organizer with Chicago Votes. I stand here today with our coalition partners and allies in Springfield because we believe in the fundamental right to vote, which means that our government's responsibility is to ensure that everyone has access to the ballot, regardless of income, regardless of race, regardless of political affiliation. One person, one vote. And that's what automatic voter registration is about. That's what our coalition has set out to do, to reduce the cost and complexity of registration so that more people can participate, so that we can avoid long lines, and so there's less confusion on Election Day. Governor Rauner missed an opportunity for our state to have one of the most modern, electronic, and efficient voter registration systems, not just in the country, but in the world. If Governor Rauner had signed this bill, Illinois would have one of the most secure registration systems in America. If you're an eligible citizen, there's no reason you should be turned away from a polling place. And it's hard to understand why Governor Rauner would veto this common sense legislation. Automatic registration is not about political parties. It's not about politics. It's about saving time and saving money. It's about the health and integrity of our democracy. Illinois ranks 47th in the nation in terms of youth voter participation in local elections. And automatic voter registration is one solution to that problem. And Governor Rauner might like this. In Oregon, the first state to implement automatic voter registration, we saw an increase in youth participation among young Republicans who were automatically registered. So we'll keep working with our friends and allies, Democrats and Republicans, until we have the most secure, efficient, and accurate voter registration system possible. And we'll do that with automatic voter registration.
Thank you, Devon. We have, again, great legislators, but we'll go ahead and start with questions. I thought, we got to go with the guy with the best tie in the room. That's you. Don't you think?
So, David, are you accusing Governor Raunder of being part of some kind of voter suppression effort?
I'm not accusing anything. I think we're stating facts. The facts are the reasons given. This will provide less integrity. That silly comments there about 3 people out of millions of votes over a period of time, when in fact 2 of the 3, as was pointed out, were mistakes made by Secretary of State's office. Okay, we do not have a problem with non-citizens trying to cheat and vote in Illinois. We've researched this for years. These people do not want to be deported for accidentally registering to vote. Okay, to use as an example, I'm not going to use those words. The bottom line is this group has done a lot over the last few years to advance Illinois into a state that supports improving registration. This is a step backward. This, I'm not going to call it, but maybe what other states are doing, but the facts show that his veto makes us less secure, makes us terribly inefficient. That's why we gave those examples, okay? Makes our lists less accurate. Even the problem they talked about in terms of, quote, non-citizens could have been solved. The bill had measures in there to protect us from that, and he vetoed that. So I can find no reasonable understanding of why this was be done unless you want to get into politics.
One quick follow-up. You mentioned 700,000 voters who you say now have to re-register.
Right.
How many of those voters, based on your experience, do you believe are not going to re-register and will not wind up voting?
Well, here's the challenge with that, Derek. First of all, it's a presidential election, and sometimes we have 75 to 80%. People do want to be registered, and they want the choice to vote. Okay, I can't tell you for sure because we never know whether or not some of those people have moved. These people think they're registered. We've done research. We all know that. These are people that they move from maybe my district to Carol's district, and they think their registration keeps up with them. Okay, and they do not know this. And it'd be one thing if it was 20 years ago. Now we have the technology to simply do it. Okay, so to deny that opportunity, that causes a lot of pain and inefficiencies. For all the reasons I mentioned before, this is a cost-saving measure. The governor's action makes it more expensive. This is an efficiency. It makes it less efficient. This is for ease of the voters, and it makes it burdensome. So I can find no legitimate reason, and certainly doesn't violate federal law at all. I mean, other states are doing it. So anybody else? But no, gentlemen, yeah.
Elaborate on the federal law thing, because the governor says quite clearly that federal law explicitly says you have to affirmatively, a voter has to affirmatively say they're qualified, and then going with the system that allows somebody to opt out after the fact doesn't come up as stuff.
Okay, except that's not what federal law says, but okay. I think the governor's clearly wrong. This is a floor. This is a floor. The Voter Registration Act. Okay,
Yes.
and other states are doing it, by the way.
So,
Introduce yourself.
my name's how many states are
5.
5 other states have the same law already.
Well, it's the same, but they have
versions of automatic voter registration in 5 other states? I'm Abe Scar. I'm the director of Illinois PIRG.
Say again, please.
Yeah, Abe Scar, SCARR, director of Illinois PIRG. Worked with a lot of the folks here in the details of drafting the legislation. I'll be happy to talk to folks in more detail so we don't have to get into everything here. But the basics of the National Voter Registration Act require that at the Secretary of State's office they're informed of the eligibility criteria to vote, and that they're given the opportunity to attest to their qualifications. It does not require them to attest in order to be registered. And we worked with national experts on the National Voter Registration Act in crafting this. We worked with the general counsels of all the legislative bodies on both House and Senate, both Republican and Democrat. And you saw that Republicans and Democrats vetted this bill and voted for it. And I don't believe that would have happened if we were in violation of federal law like the governor claims.
Elaborate just a little bit. Federal law doesn't say that a prospective voter has to say, I'm eligible. They just have to be given an opportunity to say, I'm not.
They have to be given the opportunity to say that they are.
And we give them the opportunity. It's
And
just
that
not
isn't-
the way the governor wants.
So when the governor says that he applauds the intention, he supports it, but just has problems with the methods and says there need to be changes, what do you say?
For me, no offense to the governor, but I don't buy it. I don't buy it for a moment. As we said here, we have 50 out of 57 state senators, okay, including Republicans. As was just mentioned by Abe, experts, everybody talked about this. I think Carol mentioned this, it's kind of last minute. This has all been a big discussion. The top people in both parties discuss these things. So I believe since the reasons stated are inaccurate, and since the language is flowery but means nothing, none of us are satisfied to say how wonderful we're all working on this stuff. No, we worked hard because we want a bill to be passed. So we simply do not buy the reasons given in the veto message.
My understanding is that there was some discussion with the governor's office about making changes to the bill. I thought the discussion sort of broke down. Can you elaborate on what happened there?
Yeah, we spoke to the governor's office over the course of last week. Basically started talking to them about 3 weeks ago. We've had some good discussions. There's some tweaks to the bill which we are willing to accept. There's others that they propose that we're not, like pushing the implementation date back 1 year. And frankly, those are discussions that should have happened in April and May and not in August.
Any Republicans in the group here that might want to talk about the politics of it? Any Republicans in this group?
So we've worked with, I am not a Republican, but we have worked, we go in district, a lot of our Republican supporters are out in the collar counties, so it was difficult to actually mobilize them here, but afterwards we can give you some context and have a discussion with them. But we've worked with them. This is 7 months. All the folks here, this is the first coalition that's worked on voting rights that is this diverse, that has folks like me and others who've been working on this. So it's not that we've been flying under the radar.
So can anyone dispel the notion that some might have that this is a political gathering, Democrat versus Republican?
This is a few.
Go to the microphone.
Okay. These are, what we have here is a few outstanding elected officials and all these groups. The citizens, remember, this is a broad coalition that Kathleen's speaking for. So remember, we didn't even call everybody. So the politics is, I don't really, I mean, I could say a lot of things about the politics, but the bottom line is we want to stick to the facts. The facts are it's a good bill. We can't give you all the governor's reason. We can't tell you what a Republican's going to say. We do believe, we're glad a lot of Republicans signed on to the bill. What happens now when the governor has amassed millions of dollars to punish people that go his way, I do not know what that's going to happen. I don't like when the governor does it. I don't like when the mayor does it. But that's political. I can't tell you what those Republicans will do. But they did support the bill.
Jackie, to what extent do you think Ronner's just trying to prevent more votes for Democrats?
I'm speaking for myself and not for this coalition. That would be my suspicion.
What would be your suspicion?
Just what.
Can you say what you said?
Oh. So you're going to use this in a soundbite,
And I'm not going to. It's a good one. Go ahead.
I just think that if you look across the nation, we see there has been moves by Republican legislators and governors to restrict the access to the polling booth. I am personally offended by that. As someone who had relatives who died and fought for the right to vote. So when you have the right to vote, it empowers everyone, not just African Americans, but women, youth, Hispanics, immigrants, Asians. So I'm personally offended by the move by this governor. So you can interpret it the way you want, but.
But I want you to answer my question, if that interrupts you. To what extent do you think this is Ronner trying to prevent more votes for Democrats?
Given the democratic makeup, the demographic makeup of the state, I can very well see that is true. We know that right now, Illinois is a blue state. We know that in the last elections, the primary impetus for ushering in Obama presidency was those underrepresented communities who had the access to vote. That was the youth, there was African American women, there were other groups as well. Those underrepresented entities were the ones that ushered in an Obama presidency, led by African American women, I might say. And I do feel it is to circumvent, to shortcut, and to sort of diminish the power of those constituencies.
Wait a second, Elizabeth, I'm going to make it real clear in the strongest possible terms. You're asking us political questions, which are fine, but everybody here wants to emphasize those 700,000 people are Republicans, Democratic, Independents, Greens.
That's right.
Those 700,000 people are going to be people of whatever makeup. They're going to be going through hoops they shouldn't have to. And that's only the beginning. If the bill went into effect as we planned in 2018, millions more Illinoisans would have access to these roles in a more efficient way. And that's Republicans and Democrats. So we think there's a good bill for everybody, period. We do not trust, we don't believe the veto message. We don't believe those are the real reasons behind the decision, but that's, the governor's going to have to explain that.
The governor says that he would be willing to go along with this bill if two changes in particular were made. One, if all prospective voters had to sign a statement saying that they're qualified, and two, that they'd have to approve any change in address that's different from their current address. Can you go along with that?
I wasn't at the I wasn't at the negotiating table. I would. You want to answer that?
That's all right.
Good, but no, it's a.
If one of the lawmakers could answer that question?
Well, the lawmakers weren't involved in the last week's
He didn't involve
negotiations.
them, no.
So we as the coalition is Just Democracy, we're in negotiations with the governor's office. So we can bring someone up from
Which
our
says
coalition
something about-
to answer your question.
Okay.
All right. Well, we could.
Abe, back to Abe. Okay.
That's not where the negotiations broke down specifically, no. The two things that they asked for that we did not agree to go along with, in coordination with legislative leaders, was to push back the implementation date for the automatic registration of new voters from January 1st, 2018 to January 1st, 2019. Again, as Clerk Orr commented at the beginning, there were other changes to use information already existing in state government databases to update registrations that would have gone into effect this fall. But there was a request to push back that implementation timeline. The other was to effectively switch the way the opt-out process worked from one where we think will result in more people being registered, more efficiencies, more data security, to one that would be less effective by requiring people to opt out at the immediate time of agency interaction. We don't think that's required. We don't think it's as an effective system, and so we said we didn't want to go along with that.
What was the reasoning given for wanting to push back the implementation date?
They claimed that it was a burden on the State Board of Elections to implement on that timeline, but we would point out that the State Board of Elections agreed to this timeline in negotiations. They were supportive of the bill when it as passed.
So, Abe, are you suggesting that the governor's reasons were not, in his veto message, he clearly said the two things I just referred to. You're saying that really wasn't?
You can refer for whatever conclusions you want. I'm just stating what were the negotiations, what we agreed to, and what we didn't.
And the 2 points were the bumping back the registration date until after the next gubernatorial election.
That's one.
And immediate opt-out on the
That's correct.
The address thing.
But that didn't include the year look back. That would have still happened.
It was less of a look back and more of a just to use the data that we're compiling already through participation in ERIC, which is a multi-state data sharing process, and use that information to update registrations this fall.
Who was the chief negotiator for the governor on this?
It was Mitch Holzringer, the Deputy Chief of Staff.
Obviously, since we think the opt-out is what we want, and because we want this to affect millions of people as soon as possible, you can see why the negotiators felt that was not the direction they wanted to go. Anybody else? Great questions?
What's the timeline now? I mean, is there any way that this could get done before November election?
There's no timeline right now. Now it's a question of what people do, what the organizations do, what our legislative leaders recommend that we do. This all happened Friday at the end of the day, so that will all be discussed.
Yeah,
Good,
the next
Robert.
time we're going to be in session is November 15th. So there's nothing we can do until we're back in session.
But I do want to emphasize, and if you do, remember, we want to let those 1 in 10 Illinoisans know that they may need to go and re-register, and thank the governor for that. Not that they don't like coming to our office, but.
Any of you legislators like your chances of overriding him?
Well, in this case, because we're back in session November 15th, the override may help in some future day, but it won't help those who are wanting to vote this November.
But that's what I mean. I
Yeah.
understand that.
Yeah.
You think you have the horses to override it?
Well, we will only know when we get there. You know, we have to talk to the Republicans who supported this bill. We had bipartisan support. We will go back to the same members and say, you know, of course you believe in the access to the ballot, so let's do what we need to do to get this
Is your
done.
own caucus united?
I think our caucus is united on this bill.
The Senate, definitely, we're united.
Yeah.
On it.
That's not really more the problem.
Yeah, yes. I mean, we have thousands of students who will be at the University of Illinois within the next few days, and we will be registering them to vote. Many of them could have already been registered to vote under this premise, but we have to do this every time, especially on a campus as large as the university. So we sent out members from our community to help register those students to vote, and in essence, to educate them, because many of them don't even know where the clerk's office is when they come to Champaign-Urbana. So we're trying to make that process easier for this. This veto makes it much more difficult for those students who want to vote this November, and they'll have a very long wait. We had 2-3 hour waits for students who had gotten to the university and were not registered, thought they were, and had to re-register on the spot. That's what we wanted to prevent with this bill. Unfortunately, we weren't able to do that because of the veto.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I hope okay. I said it wasn't a public. Was it okay?
You did good. Very good. Yeah. And you put it out there. It's very good.
And you said it was yours.
Well done.